If you're still babying fragile supermarket vegetables, you're wasting most of your gardening energy on plants that would die the moment you stop watching them. There are 13 forgotten vegetables that grow almost like weeds, come back on their own, and quietly feed you while you live your life, and almost nobody talks about them. Before we dig into them, take a second and hit subscribe. This channel is for gardeners like you who want real food, less pain, and a garden that loves you back as you get older. Vegetable 1. Sea Kale. Sea kale is not the curly kale you see in the supermarket. It's a different plant, and in the wild, it grows on windy, salty beaches in Europe. Imagine that for a moment. Sand, stones, cold winds, and this plant not only survives, it thrives. Now bring that attitude into your backyard. If a vegetable can handle a beach, it can handle most gardens in the US, Canada, or the UK. Sea kale is a perennial. That means you plant it once and it comes back year after year from the same root. In many climates, it can live 10, 15, even 20 years if it's happy. In the US, it usually does well from about USDA Zone 5 up through Zone 8. So think places like New England, the Pacific Northwest, and much of the Midwest and coastal areas. In milder parts of Canada and most of the UK, it's very comfortable. Here's what makes sea kale special for a lazy gardener. In early spring, it sends up thick, pale shoots. Those shoots can be eaten just like asparagus. Later, it produces broad blue-green leaves that you can cook like a gentle cabbage or broccoli leaf. So one plant gives you both asparagus-like shoots and leafy greens. Sea kale doesn't need rich soil. It likes good drainage and full sun or light shade. Once the roots are deep, you don't have to pamper it. A bit of compost once a year is kind, some mulch around the base keeps the weeds down and the moisture in. But if you have a week where you're tired or your joints ache and you just can't get outside, sea kale will keep sitting there waiting. The only tricky part is the beginning. Sea kale can be a bit slow to start from seed, but you can often find root cuttings or small plants from specialty nurseries in the US, Canada, and the UK. Once it's established, it becomes that quiet friend who never complains. If you've ever felt guilty because your regular kale got eaten by cabbage worms or melted in a hot summer, sea kale is your second chance. It was built for tougher places than your backyard. And if you're enjoying learning about these stubborn survivors, Vegetable 2. Good King Henry. The next vegetable has a name that sounds like a fairy tale character. Good King Henry. This is an old European leafy green that people once called the king of soil vegetables because you could plant it, walk away, and it would keep feeding you for 10, 15, even 20 years. Good King Henry is a perennial that acts a bit like spinach, but without the fragile, needy personality. It grows in clumps, sending up soft, arrow-shaped leaves that you can harvest again and again. The taste is mild and gentle, not bitter, not spicy, perfect for older taste buds that prefer comfort over sharpness. In the US, Good King Henry can usually handle zones 4 to 7 quite well, so it's good for colder and moderate areas, parts of the northern Midwest, New England, the Pacific Northwest inland, and much of Canada, where winters are real, but not brutal once the plant is established. In the UK, with those cool, damp summers, it feels right at home. Here's what makes it powerful for you. You plant it in a quiet corner with half sun or light shade. Give it average soil, maybe a bit of compost, and it will come back every spring, ready to give leaves. In early spring, the young shoots can even be cooked like asparagus. Later, the leaves can be picked for soups, stews, or lightly steamed. You don't need to hover over it. If life gets busy and you forget it for a week or two, it doesn't sulk. It just keeps growing. This plant fits perfectly into a lazy garden system because it rewards gentle, steady harvesting. The more often you snip a few leaves, the more it tends to send new ones. If your back or knees don't like long weeding sessions, you can mulch around the clump and let Good King Henry simply sit there as a permanent, low-effort salad and cooking green. And here's something most people never say. For an older gardener, the best garden jobs are short and repeatable. You don't want to spend 3 hours bending once. You want 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Good King Henry matches that rhythm. Short walks, small harvests, constant supply. If you feel a little spark thinking, I could actually manage that. Vegetable 3. Lovage. Now let's talk about a plant that can take a corner of your garden and bring you flavor for almost the whole growing season. Lovage. Lovage looks like a big, strong herb, like celery that decided to grow up and move out of the supermarket. It can easily reach 4 to 6 feet tall, with stems that smell like powerful, fresh celery when you crush them. For older gardeners in the US, Canada, and the UK, this plant is a quiet money saver and a time saver. Why? Because you can stop buying those bunches of celery every week just to chop a small piece into soups and stews. Lovage is a perennial in many temperate climates. In the US, it usually does well in zones 4 to 8, so a big stretch of the country can grow it. It likes full sun to part shade and average well-drained soil. In Canada's milder areas and across much of the UK, it overwinters happily and returns bigger each year. Here's how it works in a lazy garden. You pick a spot, maybe near your kitchen door, maybe near the back of a bed because it gets tall. You plant 1 or 2 lovage plants. You water them while they settle in, and after that, they mostly look after themselves. Throughout the season, you can cut leaves to chop into soups or stalks, young stems to use like strong celery, seeds dried and used as a spice. With one plant, you can have celery flavor for 8 months of the year without replanting. The pain point it solves is simple. If your joints complain every time you push a heavy grocery cart, or if money is tight, Lovage quietly takes one more thing off your shopping list. You step outside, snip, and you're done. And because it's so hardy, you don't have to worry if a heat wave hits in August or a cold snap comes a bit early in fall. Lovage is used to rough treatment. One tip: the flavor is strong. You often need less than you think. For a lazy gardener, that's a gift. You do less cutting, less chopping, and still get a lot of taste. If you're starting to picture a little flavor corner in your garden, a Sea Kale plant, a Good King Henry patch, a big lovage clump, pause for a second and click subscribe. Each new video will help you fill that corner with plants that work while you rest. Vegetable 4. Walking onions. Now let's add something fun. A plant that moves. Walking onions are sometimes called Egyptian walking onions or tree onions. They are a type of perennial onion that almost feels like a little miracle the first time you see them. Here's what they do. They send up a stalk, and instead of a big flower, they form a cluster of small bulbs at the top, like a tiny onion bouquet. Over time, those top bulbs get heavy, the stalk bends down, and the little bulbs touch the soil, root, and grow into new plants. So the onion, literally, walks across your garden, one bend at a time. Why is this perfect for a lazy gardener in the US, Canada, or the UK? Because you plant them once, and over the years they slowly spread themselves without you bending, digging, or fiddling with seed packets. Walking onions are cold hardy. In many places, they handle zones 3 through 9, meaning they can live in much of Canada, most of the northern and central US, and the UK's mild climate. Winter snows don't scare them. Summer heat doesn't usually bother them as long as the soil isn't a swamp. You can use them in three main ways: the green tops, like chives or scallions, the small bulbs at the base, like tiny onions, or the top-set bulbs, which you can replant or cook with. For an older gardener, they solve a very real pain point: having a steady supply of onion flavor without having to sow annual onion seeds or sets every single year. Walking onions allow you to create a little strip of walking onions along the edge of a bed or near a path. Over the years, they'll gently march along that line. All you need to do is trim what you need for cooking and occasionally pull or move a clump if they get too thick. No seed starting lights, no precise planting dates, no babying. And there's something satisfying about knowing that even if you had a year where you were ill, busy, or traveling, you'd still come home to onions in the ground, waiting for you. If that thought makes you breathe a little easier, if you like the idea of plants that go on with life even when you can't, tap that subscribe button. You are exactly the kind of gardener this channel is made for. Smart, seasoned, and ready for plants that finally match your reality. Vegetable 5. Skirret. Skirret is a gentle, old-fashioned root crop that almost nobody in modern gardening talks about. It's a perennial, or at least long-lived, and it grows as a clump of slender white roots. Think of it as the opposite of a fussy carrot. Carrots want perfect, loose soil. Skirret is happy enough in average beds and even in spots that are a bit heavier. The flavor is soft, sweet, and lightly nutty. Many people describe it as a mix of carrot and parsnip, but with a smoother, more comforting taste. Roasted, stewed, or added to soups, it feels like the kind of food your grandparents might have quietly enjoyed without making a fuss. For gardeners in the U.S., skirret can grow in many temperate regions, roughly zones 4 to 8, if the soil isn't bone dry all the time. That means a lot of the northern and central U.S., parts of southern Canada, and almost all of the U.K. can grow it. Here's why it's powerful for lazy gardeners. You plant a clump once. The first year, you get to know the plant. By the second year, the clump thickens. When you harvest, you don't need to rip out and reseed the whole area. You simply dig carefully, remove some of the roots, and leave part of the clump in the ground or replant a few pieces. That way, skirret becomes a semi-permanent resident. You don't have to remember to start it every spring. It quietly waits for you, and every cool season, it offers sweet roots again. If you've ever felt tired of the sow, weed, thin, harvest, pull, repeat cycle, skirret is a way to soften that pattern. You're building a relationship with a plant that stays. Vegetable 6. Salsify. Next is a vegetable that would never win a beauty contest, but might quietly become your favorite root: Salsify. Sometimes called oyster plant, Salsify is a long, thin root that looks a bit like a pale, rough stick. If you saw it in a bin, you might walk right past. But when you peel it and cook it, it transforms. The flavor is mild, slightly sweet, with a hint that some people compare to oysters or artichokes. The texture is soft and smooth when stewed or added to soups. In North America and the UK, Salsify can be grown much like other root crops in cooler climates, often doing well in zones 4 to 8. It doesn't demand perfect soil. It appreciates decently loose earth, but it isn't as delicate or particular as many commercial carrots. Here's where the lazy part comes in. Salsify is slow. That's why most commercial growers don't like it. It takes its time through the season. But for you, that slowness is an advantage. You sow it once in spring, give it light watering as it establishes, then mostly leave it alone. It doesn't need constant feeding. It doesn't scream for attention. When late fall arrives and many of your other beds are empty, you can go out with a fork, dig carefully, and pull long white roots out of the soil. In some climates, you can even leave some roots in the ground over winter and dig them as needed, especially where the soil doesn't freeze too deeply. Salsify answers a very specific pain point, having something special to harvest when most plants are gone. If you've ever looked at your garden in November or December and thought, "It's sad out here now," imagine pulling up a root that turns into a rich, creamy dish in your kitchen. It's a quiet luxury that you don't have to work hard to earn. Vegetable 7. Orach. Most gardeners know this feeling. You sow spinach in spring, it looks good for about 5 minutes, and then the weather warms and it bolts straight up, bitter and done. Orach is the plant that steps in and says, "Don't worry, I've got this." Orach is an old leafy vegetable that was grown long before modern spinach became popular. It comes in green, red, or even golden varieties, and the leaves have a mild, spinach-like taste. The big difference is this: Orach tolerates heat much better. Where spinach collapses or bolts in early summer, Orach keeps growing. For gardeners in the U.S., this is a gift if you live in places with warm summers, much of the Midwest, the interior West, and many parts of the South where cool season crops are a challenge. In Canada's warmer pockets and in the UK's cooler summers, it still does well, but its main magic is in not panicking when the sun gets strong. Orach is usually grown as a self-seeding annual, and this is where it becomes lazy. You let some plants go to seed. They drop their seeds into the soil. Next year, little Orach babies pop up where they feel comfortable. Instead of carefully sowing row after row, you can simply recognize the seedlings, pull up a few where there are too many, and leave the rest. Over a few years, your garden starts to remember Orach on its own. It shows up in empty corners, in cracks, in places you might not have chosen, but the plant did. You just harvest leaves as needed, like you would spinach or chard. If your body doesn't enjoy re-sowing greens every few weeks, Orach is like a self-replenishing salad bar. Vegetable 8. Sea beet. Sea beet is another quiet star. It's the wild ancestor of modern beets and Swiss chard. If chard is the polite cousin in a nice shirt, sea beet is the tough relative who works outdoors and never gets sick. In the wild, sea beet grows along coasts in parts of Europe in salty, windy conditions. That tells you almost everything you need to know about its toughness. In a home garden in the US, Canada, or the UK, sea beet behaves like a hardy, long-lived leafy green. In many places, it can act as a short-lived perennial, or at least reseed regularly, especially in zones 5 to 9 where winters aren't brutally dry and exposed. The leaves are thick, glossy, and deep green. The taste is similar to chard, mild, rich, and slightly earthy. Young leaves are excellent for salads, while older ones cook down beautifully in soups, stews, or sautéed with a bit of oil and garlic. Here's why it's perfect for lazy gardeners. Sea beet doesn't demand rich soil. It tolerates wind. It can handle some drought once its roots are down. And because it has that wild origin, it's not as fragile as many modern, oversized chard varieties that sulk at the first sign of stress. If you plant sea beet near the edge of a bed, mulch around it, and let it flower and seed, you'll often see new plants appearing in that area over time. You can thin them, move a few, and slowly turn that whole edge into a beet leaf bank that you can harvest from for most of the year. The pain point sea beet solves is the stress of babying greens. If you've had slugs chew your spinach, heat kill your lettuce, and cold snap damage delicate leaves, sea beet is like a quiet, steady worker who just keeps showing up. And that's what a lazy gardener really needs. Not plants that look impressive for 1 week, but plants that show up over and over, even when you don't. If that's the kind of relationship you want with your garden, go ahead and press subscribe now. You're choosing staying power over short-term drama. Vegetable 9. Oca. Oca is a small Andean tuber, sometimes called the rainbow potato because the little roots can be red, yellow, orange, or pink. When you dig them up, it really does feel like discovering a bowl of colorful candies under the soil. Oca comes from the cool highlands of South America, so it's used to strong sun but not extreme heat. In North America and the UK, that means it often does well in places with mild summers and a decent autumn. Think coastal Pacific Northwest, parts of the northern US, southern Canada with not too hot summers, and many regions of the UK where summers are bright but not burning. Here's how it behaves. You plant small tubers in spring when the soil has warmed a bit in a spot with full sun and average soil. The plant grows bushy green foliage over the summer. But the real magic happens late in the season. Oca does most of its tuber building after the days get shorter, often after the first light frosts. So while your regular potatoes may already be out of the ground, Oca is quietly swelling its roots in cool autumn soil. The flavor is interesting. When eaten raw, some varieties have a light lemony tang. When cooked, that sourness fades and turns into a soft potato-like sweetness. You can roast them, boil them, or add them to stews. For a lazy gardener, the strength of Oca is that it has very few pest problems in North America and the UK, because local insects don't really recognize it yet. It isn't a magnet for every bug in the neighborhood. You plant it, keep it watered while it establishes, mulch to hold moisture, and then mostly let it grow. You don't have to chase every beetle or cover it with fleece unless your local conditions demand it. When the tops are blackened by a light frost in late fall, you wait a week or so, then gently dig around the plants and collect the tubers. You can keep some for eating and store a few as seed for next year. It gives you a late-season harvest at a time when many beds are empty, and it does it without needing a lot from you. Vegetable 10. Ulluco. Ulluco is another ancient Andean tuber. The roots are small, often glossy, and can come in bright yellow, orange, red, and even spotted colors. Like Oca, Ulluco was shaped by life in high mountain climates. That means cool nights, strong sun, and thin soils. In the US, Canada, and the UK, it tends to do best in regions with longer, cooler seasons and not too much heat stress in midsummer. Coastal and northern areas are usually more comfortable for it than baking hot inland zones. Ulluco has a unique texture when cooked. It stays slightly firm and moist, a bit like a cross between a waxy potato and a beet without the strong beet flavor. It soaks up seasonings nicely and works well in stews and mixed vegetable dishes. For lazy gardeners, Ulluco has 3 strong points. First, like Oca, it's not widely grown, so it often escapes the worst pest attention. Second, it uses time differently. It is planted in spring and grows slowly through the season, doing most of its tuber forming late when light levels drop. So you're not forced to rush a harvest in midsummer heat. Third, once you have a batch of tubers, you can keep a portion each year as your own planting stock. You become a small keeper of an ancient food crop without having to buy seed packets again and again. You plant it in reasonably loose, well-drained soil, keep weeds down with mulch, and give it steady but not obsessive watering. It won't scream for your constant presence. For older gardeners, this means you can set it up early check it calmly through the summer, and then enjoy a colorful harvest in late fall when you have more time and the air is cooler and kinder to your body. Vegetable 11. Patience dock, or large sorrel. Now let's return above ground to a plant that gives leaf after leaf after leaf. Patience dock, sometimes grouped with large perennial sorrels, is a big, leafy green with a natural sourness. If you've ever tasted garden sorrel, that lemony bite in a leaf, it's its larger, more generous cousin. In the US, Canada, and the UK, these kinds of sorrel and dock can thrive in many temperate zones, often from 4 up through 8 or even 9, depending on soil and moisture. They handle cold winters once established and usually bounce back early in spring. The beauty for a lazy gardener is simple. You plant it once, and it can give you leaves from early spring into fall. In rich soil, it's vigorous. In poor or compacted soil, it still pushes through better than many delicate lettuces. The leaves have a gentle tang that wakes up soups and sauces. You don't need a lot. A handful chopped into potato dishes, omelets, or stews can replace squeezing a lemon or adding vinegar. This matters more than people think. Because when you have a strong perennial flavor plant, you can deepen your home cooking without needing to always buy fresh citrus or fancy ingredients. Growing it is simple. Choose a spot with sun or light shade, plant your dock or large sorrel, water it as it settles, then mulch around it. Every time you walk past, you can take a few leaves from the outer part of the plant. It doesn't require constant re-sowing. It doesn't need you to crouch and pinch out flowers every few days. If it gets big and a bit wild, you can cut it back hard once in the season, and it will regrow. For older bodies, that's important. One solid job, done standing with good tools, instead of constant little fiddly tasks on your knees. Vegetable 12. Cardoon. Let's talk about a plant that looks like an ornamental, but quietly feeds you. Cardoon. Cardoon is related to the globe artichoke. Instead of eating the flower bud, you eat the thick, fleshy leaf stalks. The plant itself can be tall and striking, with big silver-gray leaves that make it look almost like a sculpture in your garden. In many parts of the U.S., Cardoon does well in zones 7 to 9, and with some care it can also manage in parts of zone 6, especially if winters aren't too wet and the soil drains well. In warmer areas of the UK and some Canadian coastal zones, it can survive winters or be grown as a tender perennial or robust annual. Cardoon loves sun. It likes heat more than many leafy vegetables. Give it a bright, open spot and decent soil, and it will send up a big fountain of foliage. For the lazy gardener, its strength is that it can take care of itself through much of the hot season once the roots go down. You plant it, water it through the first weeks, mulch it to hold moisture, and then mostly let it stand there and be impressive. When you're ready to eat, you cut some of the thick stalks near the base, trim the leaves, peel away the tough outer strings, and cook the tender inside. The flavor is a bit like a mild artichoke with a nutty note. If you've ever wished your garden looked beautiful but also felt useful, Cardoon is a bridge between show and substance. It gives structure to a bed, feeds you, and doesn't need the pampering that delicate salad greens demand. And there's another quiet benefit. Because Cardoon is not a common vegetable, most local pests have not specialized in attacking it the way they go after cabbage, lettuce, or brassicas in general. That doesn't mean it will never have an issue, but it often stands in the sun while other plants are getting chewed. For an older gardener, This means you can put your energy into the few plants that really need you and let Cardoon hold its corner alone. Vegetable 13. Alexander's, the Roman survivor vegetable. Alexander's is one of the oldest European vegetables, carried and grown by the Romans as they moved through what is now the UK and parts of Western Europe. It was valued because almost the whole plant is useful and because it grows where many other vegetables struggle. Alexander's tastes like a gentle mix of celery and parsley. The leaves are aromatic and mild. The stems can be cooked like a softer, more fragrant celery. The seeds can be dried and used as a spice. Even the roots can be cooked as a simple vegetable. For gardeners in the US, Canada, and the UK, Alexander's fits well in cool to mild climates, especially near coasts or in places that don't get baking hot summers. It copes with wind, poorer soil, and some salt in the air. That makes it a strong candidate if you live near the sea, in a breezy garden, or in a spot where delicate crops sulk. Once established, Alexander's often self-seeds. You plant it in a corner, and over the years, it quietly maintains its own small population, coming back without you re-sowing each spring. You simply learn to recognize its seedlings and keep them where you want them. For a lazy gardener, this means one simple planting can turn into a long-term supply of flavor and greens. Instead of buying bunches of celery or parsley every week, you walk outside, cut a few stems and leaves, and let the plant keep growing. It is another polite weed in your system, persistent, adaptable, and generous without demanding much in return. If you imagine a garden with Alexander's swaying in the breeze beside your Sea Kale, Good King Henry, Lovage, walking onions, Orach's, sea beet, Skirret, Salsify, Oca, Ulluco, Patience Dock, and Cardoon, you can see how the picture is complete. 13 tough, old-fashioned vegetables, all built to help you do less work and still eat well. And you've just discovered 13 old vegetables that grow like weeds but feed like loyal friends. They don't need perfect soil, a young back, or daily attention. They suit real lives in the US, Canada, and the UK, especially if you're older, busy, or simply tired of fragile plants. Choosing them is not giving up. It's gardening smarter for this season of your life. If this vision of an easier, steadier garden speaks to you, subscribe and turn on the bell. Then comment with your growing zone and which of these 13 you'll try first. That way you join a community of gardeners choosing comfort, resilience, and real harvests over stress.